Here we are, chapter 14 already. The combination of Alex's bizarre behavior and the bone-crushing snares Tende had destroyed in the valley had unnerved Martine so much that rather waiting for the right White Giraffe to find her, she promised herself she would. She became determined to find him again. For once, luck was on her side. 8 days after her outing with Tende, a Sunday, her grandmother received a call to say that a close friend of hers had been rushed to the hospital. The hospital was in Somerset West, a couple of hours' drive away, and Gwen Thomas would have to spend the night. She wanted to take Martine with her, but Martine convinced her that it would be much better if she had stayed. "I don't want to be tired for school in the morning." "Well, that's true, although I'm surprised to hear you say so," retorted her grandmother. "But in any case, I'll be worried about you here all on your own." "I won't be on my own," Martine assured her. "Warrior and Shelby will keep me company, and if I'm scared I can call Tende. Besides, I got some homework I need to finish." At 2 o'clock she waved goodbye to her grandmother, smiling what she had hoped was her most trustworthy smile. That in itself made Gwen Thomas suspicious, and before half an hour had gone by Tende was at the door checking up on her. Luckily Martine, who really didn't have a school project to finish, was already sitting at the dining room table surrounded by books, so she had no difficulty convincing Tende that she was absolutely fine. "I'll phone you in a second if I'm not," she promised. Homework done, she went up to her room, shut the curtains on the afternoon sunshine, set the alarm, and hopped into bed. She had a long night ahead of her, and she needed all the sleep she could get. Well, it was 1 a.m. when Martine entered the game reserve, nerves tingling, and she knew within seconds that there was going to be trouble. She crouched down on the thick grass and scanned the bush carefully. Lights were flickering in the trees. At this hour, that meant one or two things. At best, it was Tende or Alex patrolling the reserve, in which, if she was discovered, her grandmother heard about her escape, her life would no longer be worth living. At worst, it was a gang of poachers, possibly even her grandfather's killers. Either way, it was a monumental disaster. Unable to get back without being seen, she used the grass as cover to make it as far as the trees and then flung herself under a clump of bushes. Presently she heard voices. The men were speaking softly, but it was a fine night and the sound traveled clearly over the water. "I'm telling you, man, this better not be one of those your wild goose chases," said one. "If we don't deliver this soon, well, the name was lost in the wind, is gonna get ugly. He's not used to being kept waiting." "When have I let you down?" a second voice demanded. "If I find that blasted animal, if it's the last thing I do." The voices came nearer, and one of the men stepped out of the trees. He walked to the water's edge and squatted to examine the mud with his flashlight. "Bullseye!" he crowed. Another emerged from the shadows. Martine tried to get a good look at him, but despite the full moon, she was too far away to be anything other than an indistinct silhouette. "What's up?" "Giraffe tracks," the first man replied. He stood up. "Now all we have to do is find the giraffe." There was a whisper of leaves, and Martine whipped around in fright. It was Jemmy. Unheard, the giraffe had crept up along beside her, and now he loomed over her, outlining like a shimmering white giant against the blue-black sky. Her eyes were locked on the two men. "Jemmy," Martine whispered, "you've got to go. Run, get lost." He didn't move. "Jemmy," hissed Martine as loudly as she dared, "run." The white giraffe seemed to notice her for the first time. His liquid black eyes swept from her to the men and back again. He was shaking. Every inch of his body was poised for flight, but something had stopped him. Abandoning all thoughts for her own safety, Martine jumped from her hiding place. "Go, Jemmy," she pleaded, drumming her fists against his legs. "You've got to go." The white giraffe shoved her purposefully with his nose. That's when it hit Martine. He wanted her to come with him. "There it is!" cried one of the men, and Martine went cold with terror. Behind her she could hear shouts and the high-pitched whine of an engine firing into life. There was no escape. In a matter of minutes she and Jemmy would be caught, unless... "Jemmy!" yelled Martine, and she ran to the nearest climbable tree. For several petrifying moments it seemed as if Jemmy was not going to follow her, but all of a sudden he did. Martine pulled herself up onto the highest branch she could reach. There was no time to think. In particular, there was no time to think about how she'd never ridden any animal, not even a Shetland pony, and that she wasn't at all good at riding a bicycle. She simply swung onto Jemmy's back and grabbed a handful of mane. The first panic surge of the White Giraffe nearly sent Martine flying. Self-preservation stopped her from falling off. Before she could adjust to the fact that she was 10 feet off the ground, on the same level as a startled owl, they were bolting into the night. Martine leaned forward the way she'd seen horse riders did in England, gripped with her legs and tried to avoid looking down. They swept through the dark trees at an incredible speed, the giraffe galloping in a rhythmic, rocking horse stride. How he avoided colliding with the overhead branches or getting a hoof caught in a root was a mystery to Martine. Nevertheless, once she got used to his sloping back, she found it surprisingly easy to ride him. He was broad and comfortable, and his fur was like satin. Soon it seemed like the most natural thing in the world to be racing through the moonlight on the back of a young giraffe. The sound of men died behind him. After a while Martine could hear nothing but the wind in her ears and the sharp cries of the night birds as they flashed by. Gradually the trees gave way to the open grasslands, and she could make out the shadows of the game reserve animals and smell the sweet smell of the bush in the night. Zebras looked up blinking as they passed. A bush baby swung torch-like eyes on them, and a couple of lionesses bounded after them hungrily before they stopped to lie in the wait for easier prey. And I'll link videos to those animals as well. About a quarter of an hour they had reached the lower slopes of the mountain. They marked Zamboani's northern boundary, and Jemmy slowed to a walk. His neck was wet with sweat, and he was breathing hard, like a galloping racehorse. He seemed to be searching for something. Martine was so exhilarated by the experience of riding a giraffe that at first she barely took in her surroundings. It was awesome, if a little vertigo-inducing, to see the world from this height. When she did look around, she found that they were in a barren clearing littered with rocks and shale at the base of a granite cliff. The air of desolation hung over the place. Usually the African night was alive with the sounds of cicadas, frogs, and nocturnal creatures, but this area seemed devoid of any life. Even the temperature seemed lower. Nothing grew here apart from a single twisted tree which had taken root in the cliff itself, and was shrouded in a tangled mass of moss and parasite creepers. Due, no doubt, to the gales that ripped around the mountain. It had grown stunted and misshapen over the years, and now Martine thought with a shudder it stood among the boulders like a sinister sentinel. She couldn't think why the White Giraffe had brought her to this awful place, but he seemed very agitated. She began to feel concerned. Through the night came a rumble of an engine. It was heading straight toward them. A searchlight swept the slopes up above their heads. "Jemmy!" Martine cried. "What are you doing? We've got to get away." Beneath her she felt the giraffe's hindquarters bunch as if he was preparing for a mighty leap. Martine put her arms around his neck and hung on for all it was worth. Until that moment she'd been too full of a miracle of a ride to wonder where Jemmy was taking her or what would happen when they got there. Now reality was setting in. She dreaded to think how many bones she would break if she did crash to the ground, or indeed how she'd manage to crawl home and explain her injuries to her grandmother, assuming, of course, that she wasn't eaten, bitten, stung, trampled, gored, or shot by poachers along the way. But there was no time to think about that now. From standing, Jemmy took 6 breathtakingly fast strides and an enormous leap. In an instant before the jeep burst into the clearing and the world went black, Martine understood why Tende had never been able to follow his tracks. The White Giraffe simply evaporated into thin air.